Our second reading this morning, also from the New Testament, is from the Gospel according to St. Luke. And for the last 3 weeks, including today, we have been hearing resurrection stories, and this is another of them, beginning at chapter 24, verse 13. Now, on that same day, 2 of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem, and talking with each other about all these things that had happened. While they were talking and discussing, Jesus himself came near and went with them. But their eyes were kept from recognizing him. And he said to them, "What are you discussing with each other while you walk along?" They stood still, looking sad. Then one of them, whose name was Cleopas, answered him, "Are you the only stranger in Jerusalem who does not know the things that have taken place there in these days?" He asked them, "What things?" They replied, "The things about Jesus of Nazareth, who was a prophet, mighty in deed and word before God and all the people, and how our chief priests and leaders handed him over to be condemned to death and crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one to redeem Israel. Yes, and besides all this, it is now the 3rd day since these things took place. Moreover, some women of our group astounded us. They were at the tomb early this morning, and when they did not find his body there, they came back and told us that they had indeed seen a vision of angels who said that he was alive. Some of those who were there with us went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but they did not see him." Then he said to them, "Oh, how foolish you are, and how slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have declared. Was it not necessary that the Messiah would suffer these things and then enter into his glory?" Then, beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them all the things about himself in all the scriptures. As they came near the village to which they were going, he walked ahead as if he were going on. But they urged him strongly, saying, "Stay with us, because it is almost evening, and the day is now nearly over." So he went in to stay with them. When he was at the table with them, he took bread, blessed and broke it, and gave it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he vanished from their sight. They said to each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he was talking to us on the road, while he was opening the scriptures to us?" That same hour they got up and returned to Jerusalem, and they found the 11 and their companions gathered together. They were saying, "The Lord has risen indeed and has appeared to Simon." Then they told what had happened on the road and how he had been made known to them in the breaking of the bread. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. They were just regular people, 2 individuals among the great crowds of the unknown faithful. There is no story about Jesus finding him in a fishing boat, or coaching him about hauling in the nets, or teasing him by inviting himself to his house to dine. We don't know that Jesus healed her, or cast demons out of her, or brought her precious child back to life. But they show up twice. At least the name does, spelled differently, a difference of 1 letter, but too similar to mean another person. His name is Cleopas, and we meet him by name here in Luke's Gospel on the road to Emmaus. And we meet his wife, one of the less well-known Marys, when she shows up in John's Gospel at the foot of the cross. And I believe we meet her again here. Once again, it is evening on the day of resurrection, only today we hear Luke's account of that evening. 2 followers of Jesus are traveling from Jerusalem to Emmaus, Cleopas and an unnamed companion who I'm going to assume is his wife, Mary. It's a journey of about 7 miles. Along they walk, these two disciples, and as they go, they are talking to one another about everything that has happened, which is to say, the events of the past days and week. Then a stranger joins them, a stranger who asks to join in on their conversation, a stranger who says, "What are you talking about as you walk along?" And they stop, dead in their tracks, which is maybe exactly what any of us would have to do if the holy broke in to our lives. But then they open their hearts and they tell their story. They tell his story. They tell the life story of Jesus of Nazareth. Has anything like this ever happened to you? An old Suzanne Vega song has the provocative first line, "If I had met you on some journey, where would we be now?" When we're traveling, we're in an in-between space, what people might call a liminal space. No longer here, but not yet there. And the freedom that offers us is enormous. And there's something about having a length of time when you're thrown together with someone on a bus or a train or a plane. There you are, individuals, each with your completely separate lives. But for this moment, you are traveling together in the same direction. What will you do? You might find yourself plugging into music or a movie or opening a book to give yourself some personal space in what are often confined, constricting spaces. Or one of you might say something interesting to the other one, or you catch one another's eyes and smile. Someone rolls their eyes at something funny that's happening. You might find yourself talking to this stranger about all sorts of things you would never share online at the bank or at the grocery store, or any place where you'd only be for a couple of minutes. Here, with the highway disappearing under you, or the landscape unfolding around you, or the clouds cocooning you, here you may choose to share something a little deeper, something more intimate about your life, your experiences. Are you traveling on business? Are you returning to your hometown for a funeral? Are you going to be reunited with your beloved? Who knows? In circumstances like these, you might find that the words simply spill out of you. You might just tell your life story. You might find that you open your heart. Cleopas and Mary are traveling home to Emmaus after what must be the most extraordinary week of their lives. And in the liminal space of this journey, they're ready to bare their souls to this stranger who has joined them, someone who perhaps reminds them of someone. They take him into their confidence, a little astonished that he doesn't seem to know automatically what they're talking about Jesus. Jesus was a mighty prophet, they say. They crucified him, they continue. And we had hoped, and they shake their heads sadly, that he was the one. And even though some friends had reported that angels were there, claiming that Jesus was alive, when some of the disciples went to the tomb, they didn't see him. The story they tell together is a sad one. It's a story with an ending in which hopes are destroyed and then rekindled and then dashed again. But the stranger seems undeterred. In fact, he picks up the thread of the story. He chides them gently and says, "Now let me tell you a story." And the words that pour forth from his mouth seem to weave together absolutely everything they need to know. All God's mighty works, from creation through the Exodus, through to the prophets, and right up to this minute and Jesus. Right up to the present, utterly confusing and yet suddenly, again, hopeful day. They're astonished. The effect on them is profound. In fact, when they come to their home in Emmaus, By all appearances, the stranger seems to be planning to go on with his journey, but they won't have it. "Stay, friend," they all but beg him. For it is evening, and the day is almost over. Whatever the stranger has kindled in their hearts, they know they don't want it to end. They invite him in. They've already opened their hearts, and now they open their home to this stranger. They offer Jesus hospitality, and that makes all the difference. In the ancient world, hospitality was a sacred act. The Middle East offers a climate that contains the lush and fertile crescent, of course, but also rocky, mountainous terrain, great expanses of hostile wilderness. In such a place, hospitality was not a nicety. It was a code of honor. It was a moral law encoded in the religious laws. People welcome strangers into their homes because not to welcome a stranger might be to condemn them to death because of a harsh climate at the hands of robbers. People welcome strangers into their homes because they knew that one day they too might have to depend on the kindness of strangers, and it could be a matter of life and death for them too. Hospitality is the heart and soul of this story. It's only by extending hospitality that the travelers have the opportunity to break bread with the stranger who, have I mentioned? Yes, it's Jesus. We know that. We know it from the beginning. Of course it's Jesus who's decided to abide with his fellow travelers. He takes the bread, he blesses it, he breaks it, and he gives it to them. And something in that action is so familiar. Is it because he did those same things on the night before he died? Is it because he did those same things every time he broke bread with his friends? Or is it something even greater, something even more deeply true about who Jesus is and what he is doing? Didn't Jesus take his own life? Didn't he bless his own life by faithfulness to God and humanity? And didn't he allow his own life to be broken and, in a profound way, shared with the world? Whatever it is that stirs their memories, their eyes are opened and they see with sudden, breathtaking clarity that the stranger in their midst is Jesus. It has been all along. They weren't just idle tales or cruel rumors. Christ is risen here and now. And they knew it and they didn't know. After he vanishes, they ask each other, weren't our hearts on fire? Weren't they burning in us as we listened to him? In her poem, Sometimes, Mary Oliver offers instructions for living a life. Pay attention. Be astonished. Tell about it. And that is exactly what these two travelers have done. They've paid attention, not only to the one they discovered to be Jesus now, but to who and what he had been before. They've been listening not only to him, but also to their own hearts, responding to him. And this openness to welcoming a stranger has resulted in a life-changing encounter with the holy. A bunch of years ago, and I think I've shared this story with you before, Presbyterians Today ran a story written by a woman who had been an ordained minister for 20 years, but decided that she really lived in a Christian ghetto. And what she meant by that phrase is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and 52 weeks a year, she only talked to and interacted with churched people. She had no life outside the church, apparently. And it had started to make her feel alienated to everyone else who was on the journey of life. So she took a 3-month sabbatical and got a job as a hostess in a Waffle House. She says of her time there, the risen Christ showed up every day. The risen Christ showed up in a mechanic who came over when a waitress called him to fix a broke traveler's broken van for the cost of a cup of coffee. The risen Christ showed up in a landlord who drove an hour and 15 minutes to pick up a stranded tenant he didn't really know very well. The risen Christ showed up in a lawyer who came every day to the Waffle House to meet clients who couldn't afford the fees his firm charged. And he never turned anyone away. There were more. Each one of them, people taking their own lives, blessing them with their willingness to serve their fellow human beings, breaking them open for the sake of someone else, and giving them away. Mary Oliver's suggestion, pay attention, be astonished, and tell about it. That together with this story offers a pretty perfect design for life lived in an Easter mode. We are just regular people, numbered among the great crowds of the unknown faithful, and we are all travelers on this journey. For this moment, we are all traveling together in the same direction, journeying between the sometimes mundane, sometimes horrifying, sometimes glorious experiences of our lives. We journey together, and the highway disappears under us, and the landscape unfolds around us, and the clouds cocoon us. We journey together in community, and while we do, we try to welcome the stranger in our midst, the unknown person with whom we are willing to break bread. That person offers us the opportunity to meet Christ anew, in the present tense, here and now. The stranger in our midst, the young person, the old person, the person of different skin color or nationality, the Jew or Muslim or Buddhist or Hindu, the gay or lesbian person, the trans person, the straight person, the person newly arrived from a foreign land, the person who thinks differently from us when it comes to politics or parenting, the person who is completely other to us, outside our experience. That stranger offers us our very best hope at encountering the risen Christ. We most likely will not recognize him when we meet. But if we can take the risk, if we can welcome him or her in, if we can truly pay attention, if we open our door, offer our table, open our heart to that stranger, we might find ourselves astonished, hearts on fire, with something amazing to tell. Thanks be to God. Amen.